The Holy Gospel according to Luke. Glory to you, O Lord. On the first day of the week, at early dawn, the women went to the tomb, taking the spices they had prepared. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they went in, they did not find the body. While they were perplexed about this, suddenly 2 men in dazzling clothes stood beside them. The women were terrified and bowed their faces to the ground, but the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, but has risen. Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee, that the Son of Man must be handed over to the hands of sinners and be crucified and on the 3rd day rise again." Then they remembered his words, and returning from the tomb, they told all of this to the 11 and to all the rest. Now it was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary, the mother of James, and the other women with them who told this to the apostles. But these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. But Peter got up and ran to the tomb. Stooping and looking in, he saw the linen cloths by themselves. And he went home, amazed at what had happened. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Maybe you remember my Christmas Eve sermon, which I began by quoting Madeleine L'Engle's well-known poem, "The Risk of Birth." "This is no time for a child to be born," she begins. 4 months and 3 liturgical seasons later, I'm stuck in the same place with an Easter twist. This is no time for a Savior to be raised, with the earth betrayed by war and hate. That was no time for a Savior to be raised in a land in the crushing grip of Rome. This is no time for a Savior to be raised, no time to celebrate, well, much of anything, least of all the improbability of resurrection. This year it feels more appropriate to linger at the Passover table next to Judas, or on the Mount of Olives with the sleeping disciples, or in the courtyard of the high priest alongside Peter, warming himself by the fire, the echo of the cock's crow ringing loudly in his ears, almost as loudly as the words of Jesus predicting that very moment. This year I'd rather linger around the cross, with the women who had followed Jesus all the way from Galilee, following his body to its final resting place in the tomb, readying the spices and ointment for a funeral. This is no time for a Savior to be raised, no time to celebrate. This is a time to mourn. You know the headlines, I said on Christmas Eve. The world engulfed by ongoing conflicts in Ukraine and Gaza. Our country plagued by deepening political hostilities. The planet itself crying out under the devastating effects of climate change. 4 months and 3 liturgical seasons later, if anything has changed, it only seems to have gotten worse, more sinister, more fearful, more anxious. Meanwhile, closer to home, after 6.5 years of parish ministry, it was bound to happen, and it did. A Holy Week funeral. Some of you were there too. This is no time for a Savior to be raised, no time to celebrate. Okay, but it's Easter Sunday, so enough of that. This joyful Easter tide away with sin and sorrow. Except It's kind of difficult to tell today's story without the ones that came before it. In the first place, like the good English grammarian that I am, I can't help but notice we run into an issue of pronoun antecedent agreement right away in Luke chapter 24, verse 1. But on the first day of the week at early dawn, they went to the tomb, taking the spices they had prepared. They who? Well, for that, we have to back up to chapter 23, verses 55 and 56. The women who had come with him from Galilee followed, and they saw the tomb and how his body was laid. Then they returned and prepared spices and ointments. On the Sabbath, they rested according to the commandment. Okay, come with him who? Saw how whose body was laid? Obviously we know, but you get the point. The more we keep reading back into the story, the more we realize how incomplete this small part is on its own. It's difficult, if not impossible, to tell today's story without the ones that came before. Now, I'm a pastor, so I don't get this experience, but sometimes I do wonder what it's like to come to church on Easter Sunday to hear this resurrection gospel without having heard the Good Friday Passion, or the Maundy Thursday New Commandment, or even the Palm Sunday triumphal entry that started it all. In seminary, I was taught that the liturgies spanning from Maundy Thursday through the Easter Vigil, the great 3 days, are really one service in 3 parts. Good Friday picks up where Maundy Thursday leaves off, in a barren, somber sanctuary with altar stripped. And similarly, the Easter Vigil picks up where Good Friday leaves off, singing the triumph of the cross, as the liturgical rubrics put it, halfway to proclaiming resurrection, but not quite. Waiting, hoping, expectant. The point being, we need the bigger picture. And in fact, dare I say that this story today is meaningless without all the other stories before it. We need the Last Supper of Maundy Thursday. We need the betrayal, the denial, and the abandonment. We need the cross in all its bloodied mess. We need the seeming finality of the tomb, cold and dark. We need all of those things to get us to the place where we can hear, with terror and wonder, the startling announcement of the unnamed men in dazzling clothes. Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, but has risen. Now, of course, the women had no reason to look for the living when death was all they had come to expect. This is no time for a Savior to be raised. Have you lost your mind? Just let us have our quiet funeral. Which makes the resurrection all the more startling, all the more amazing, all the more good news that in the coldest, darkest, bleakest night, resurrection happens. Remember how Madeleine L'Engle's Christmas poem ends? Yet love still takes the risk of resurrection. Holy Week is full of risks. As Jewish New Testament scholar Amy Jill Levine writes, Jesus risks arrest when he enters Jerusalem to public acclaim, and so brings himself to the attention of those who would see his kingship as a challenge to their own political authority. He turns over tables at the temple and thus risks the results of righteous anger. His risks continue as he teaches in the temple and faces challenges to his proclamation. There is risk, too, for those who follow their risk-taking teacher, for the disciples who associate themselves with someone who has made enemies of the religious elite and the Roman state, for the women who come to the tomb to anoint Jesus' body, seeking to minister to a man put to death by Roman capital punishment. Holy Week is full of risks, and Easter is no different. Resurrection is risky. Resurrection means Jesus is Lord, which might not sound like much to our ears, but as the late prolific New Testament scholar Marcus Borg reminds us, the phrase Jesus is Lord has depths of meaning not always seen in a tradition like modern Christianity, in which the affirmation has become commonplace. Jesus is Lord. Rome is not. The domination system of the empire is not. The Lord of conventional wisdom is not. If Jesus is Lord, then all the would-be lords of our lives are not. It's a risky proclamation, and quickly you begin to see why the Jesus movement that became the early church suffered persecution under a power-hungry and self-serving empire. If Jesus is Lord and he is alive, that's a threat. On second thought, maybe this is a perfect time for a Savior to be raised, a perfect time to take the risk of resurrection. And for as important as those stories before are for the story today, all of it is meaningless without the stories that come after. In the beginnings and strugglings of the early church, bearing witness to resurrection despite persecution, devoting themselves to this teaching and sharing life together in spite of great risk. Far from an idle tale, the resurrection inaugurated a movement from the early church to the present day, striving, often imperfectly, but almost always sincerely, for a more loving, more empathetic community, for a more just, more hopeful world. By this everyone will know you are my disciples, if you show up on Easter morning in your Sunday best for the after worship family photo in front of the altar flowers? Not quite. By this everyone will know you are my disciples, Jesus tells them, just after washing their feet and giving them a new commandment. If you have love for one another. By this everyone will know that we are disciples, if we have love for one another. A love that compels us to speak out where love is absent, to advocate on behalf of the vulnerable, the fearful, and the detained, on behalf of the immigrant afraid to leave their home for fear they might not come back, or the refugee wondering where home even is, or the young transgender kid just trying to figure themselves out and survive. A love that compels us to take seriously the call of this rabble-rousing, dark-skinned first-century Jewish teacher from Palestine who risked it all, even his life, to decisively take sides with the poor and the oppressed. As the scope of our story widens even further, going back to the beginning of it all, in his hometown synagogue of Nazareth, he unrolls the scroll of the prophet Isaiah. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set free those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. This love takes the risk of resurrection and proclaims that Jesus is Lord, and the power-hungry and self-serving empire is not. This is, in fact, the perfect time for a Savior to be raised, a perfect time to proclaim against all odds and despite the risk, in coldest, darkest, bleakest night, when at early dawn we come with the women to the tomb, expecting more of the same. Resurrection is possible.